You wake up in silk sheets that cost more than most people's yearly wages, wearing a nightgown gifted by a king, surrounded by jewels you can never truly own. The servants bow as you pass, but their eyes burn with contempt. You're envied and despised in equal measure. You have the monarch's ear in the bedroom, but no voice in the kingdom. Welcome to the life of a royal mistress, where power is an illusion and survival is never guaranteed. Being the secret lover of a king sounds romantic in movies and novels, but the reality was a carefully orchestrated nightmare. These women lived in a bizarre purgatory between privilege and shame, caught between the admiration of a powerful man and the hatred of an entire nation. They had no legal protection, no guarantee of security, and no way out once they entered the gilded cage. Their stories have been sanitized by history, reduced to scandalous footnotes and whispered rumors, but the truth is far darker than any royal portrait suggests. The first thing you need to understand is that influence meant nothing without legitimacy. A mistress could whisper advice to the king over breakfast, suggest appointments, even sway political decisions. But the moment she overstepped or became inconvenient, she vanished. Kings showered their lovers with estates, titles, and expensive gifts, creating the appearance of importance. But these tokens were never truly theirs. Everything could be stripped away with a single command. The mistress owned nothing, not even her own reputation. Royal mistresses were political tools first, and lovers second. Kings didn't choose mistresses purely for affection or beauty. These relationships served calculated purposes. A monarch might elevate a woman from a powerful family to secure loyalty, or display a stunning courtesan to prove his virility and dominance. Mistresses were paraded at state functions to send messages to foreign ambassadors and rival nobles. They were human chess pieces, moved across the board of court intrigue, expendable the moment they ceased being useful. The life cycle of a royal mistress followed a predictable pattern. Young, beautiful, and often from minor nobility, she would catch the king's attention through careful orchestration by her family or political faction. Once installed in royal favor, she enjoyed a brief period of influence and luxury. But beauty fades, kings grow bored, and younger women always waited in the wings. When the inevitable replacement arrived, the discarded mistress faced a brutal reality. Some were married off hastily to minor nobles, willing to accept damaged goods in exchange for royal favor. Others retreated to convents or remote estates, essentially imprisoned for life, to prevent embarrassing revelations. The luckiest simply disappeared from court without scandal, their names gradually erased from official records. The fear of pregnancy haunted every royal mistress. A child was both validation and catastrophe. If the king acknowledged the baby, the mistress gained temporary security, though royal bastards complicated succession and inflamed legitimate heirs. If he denied paternity or the pregnancy became inconvenient, the consequences could be deadly. Secret births, forced abortions, and babies sent away immediately after delivery were common. Some mistresses died from botched procedures or childbirth complications in hidden rooms, their deaths attributed to sudden illness. Others watched their children taken away, raised by strangers, knowing any attempt to reclaim them meant certain ruin. Physical evidence of affairs created constant danger. Love letters written in moments of passion became weapons if discovered. A piece of jewelry given privately could spark scandal if worn publicly. Portraits commissioned in secret sometimes surfaced decades later, proof of relationships that were supposed to remain unacknowledged. Mistresses lived knowing that a single intercepted message or stolen trinket could destroy them. Many burned correspondence immediately after reading, wore gifts only in private chambers, and trusted no one completely. Even servants who dressed them and emptied their chamber pots posed threats, capable of selling secrets to rival factions or bitter queens. Speaking of queens, these women held the real power to destroy a mistress. Queens couldn't easily challenge their husbands directly without risking their own positions, but they wielded enormous informal authority over court life. A queen could ensure a mistress was excluded from important ceremonies, seated in humiliating positions at banquets, or subjected to whispered insults from courtiers who took their cues from royal displeasure. More aggressive queens arranged convenient accidents, mysterious illnesses after shared meals, or sudden falls down staircases. Some queens played longer games, waiting years for the perfect moment to strike, ensuring the mistress's children were disinherited or her family stripped of honors after the king's death. The psychological torture of this existence broke many women. Royal mistresses occupied an impossible social position, neither truly noble nor common, respected by no one despite proximity to ultimate power. They couldn't marry without permission, which was rarely granted since marriage would remove them from availability. They couldn't openly mourn when the king died, forced to grieve in secret while watching his widow receive public sympathy. They lived under constant surveillance, their every word and action analyzed for signs of disloyalty or ambition. The isolation was absolute. Other noble women shunned them as threats and embarrassments. Common people despised them as symbols of aristocratic corruption. Even their own families often treated them as shameful necessities, useful only for the access and favors they provided. The physical demands placed on these women were relentless. Royal mistresses were expected to maintain perfect beauty and charm at all times, aging far more slowly than nature allowed. They spent hours each day on elaborate cosmetic routines, using dangerous substances like lead-based makeup that slowly poisoned them. Their diets were restricted to maintain fashionable figures. They wore suffocating corsets and heavy gowns in sweltering rooms, smiling through pain and exhaustion. Every wrinkle, every pound gained, every sign of fatigue brought the dreaded replacement one step closer. They were living dolls, required to be perpetually delightful while fully aware they were being consumed. Let's examine specific women who lived this nightmare. Nell Gwyn became Charles II's mistress after a career as an actress, already scandalous for a woman of her era. Though Charles genuinely cared for her and she provided him 2 sons, she was forever branded as low-born entertainment, mocked as the Protestant whore by Catholic rivals. After Charles died, Nell found herself financially insecure despite years of royal favor, dependent on the goodwill of the new king, who had no obligation to support his uncle's former lover. Barbara Villiers, another of Charles II's many mistresses, wielded enormous influence during her prime, extracting titles, money, and estates from the besotted king. She bore him 5 children, each acknowledged and ennobled. Yet when she aged and Charles moved on, Barbara's gambling addiction and expensive lifestyle destroyed her finances. She died in relative poverty, her reputation in ruins. Remembered primarily for her legendary temper and insatiable demands, rather than any positive contributions. Alice Keppel served as Edward VII's mistress for over a decade, known as his official comforter, and granted unusual access to state affairs. She managed the relationship with such discretion that even Queen Alexandra tolerated her presence. But when Edward died, Alice was immediately excluded from mourning rituals and court life. Her years of service meant nothing once the man who protected her was gone. Ironically, Alice's great-granddaughter Camilla would decades later marry Charles III, transforming from mistress to queen consort, a fate Alice could never have imagined possible. Mary Boleyn's story demonstrates the ultimate disposability of royal mistresses. She became Henry VIII's lover before her sister Anne caught the king's attention. Mary bore Henry possibly 2 children, though he never officially acknowledged them. When Anne became queen, Mary was married off and removed from court. After Anne's execution, Mary secretly married for love and was banished permanently for daring to choose her own husband. She lived out her days in obscurity, her royal connection bringing only suffering. The daily reality of a mistress's life was suffocatingly controlled. She might have luxurious private apartments, but servants reported her every movement. She attended royal dinners where courtiers whispered cruel gossip loud enough for her to hear, but quiet enough to deny if challenged. She smiled through public humiliation, knowing any display of anger or sadness would be used as evidence of unfitness. She watched legitimate wives and daughters receive respect she would never have, no matter how many nights she spent in the king's bed. Even the children born from these relationships suffered unique torments. Royal bastards existed in legal and social limbo, acknowledged enough to receive some benefits, but forever barred from true legitimacy. They carried the permanent stain of their mother's shame, reminded constantly that their very existence was scandalous. Some were raised in secret, never knowing their true parentage until adulthood. Others grew up at court, watching legitimate half-siblings receive everything denied to them. The mothers of these children endured the special agony of loving offspring they could never fully claim or protect. The financial precariousness shocked many mistresses, who assumed royal favor meant permanent security. Kings gave lavish gifts during the affair, but these presents technically remained crown property, returnable at any time.
Smart mistresses converted jewelry into cash and land as quickly as possible, building independent wealth while they could. Others foolishly trusted the king's promises of lifelong support, only to discover that promises died with the man who made them. New monarchs had no obligation to maintain their predecessors' mistresses, and many cut them off immediately to establish moral authority and please their own wives. Religious institutions offered no sanctuary either. The church officially condemned adultery, while practically accepting royal mistresses as inevitable. Priests who served the court navigated impossible contradictions, blessing legitimate marriages while hearing confessions from women trapped in sanctioned sin. Some mistresses found genuine faith and retreated to convents after their royal affairs ended, seeking redemption and peace. Others were forced into religious life against their will, essentially imprisoned to prevent them from speaking publicly about their experiences or attempting to leverage their former influence. The few mistresses who managed to thrive after royal favor ended did so through extraordinary intelligence and ruthless pragmatism. They saved money secretly, cultivated relationships with multiple power centers, and planned exit strategies years in advance. They understood that sentiment meant nothing in royal politics, that today's favor was tomorrow's forgotten history. These survivors wrote no memoirs, burned their correspondence, and faded into respectable obscurity, their wild pasts becoming unconfirmed rumors rather than documented scandals. Historical records systematically minimized or erased royal mistresses whenever possible. Official genealogies omitted their children or attributed paternity to convenient husbands. Palace records excluded their presence from events they definitely attended. Family trees were scrubbed of embarrassing branches. Letters were destroyed or locked away for centuries. Even portraits were sometimes altered or hidden, painted over or relegated to storage. The women who shared kings' most intimate moments were treated as historical inconveniences, their erasure as complete as possible. The ultimate irony is that kings are remembered as powerful, romantic, or tragic figures, while their mistresses are reduced to footnotes and scandalous anecdotes. Henry VIII is famous for his 6 wives, but few people can name his numerous mistresses, despite the children some bore him. Charles II is celebrated for restoring the monarchy, not for the emotional damage inflicted on women who loved him. Louis XIV is remembered as the Sun King, not for the parade of mistresses he cycled through like seasonal fashions. History wrote women out of their own stories, leaving only the men who used them. Some mistresses were literally buried in unmarked graves to prevent their final resting places from becoming embarrassing pilgrimage sites or reminders of royal indiscretion. Their deaths were announced vaguely, if at all, their funerals attended by no one important, their estates divided among creditors or distant relatives. They simply ceased to exist in any meaningful public sense, as if their years of intimacy with the most powerful men in the kingdom had never happened. The ultimate prison of this existence destroyed women's sense of self. They were valued only for beauty and sexual availability, yet shamed for providing exactly what was demanded. They wielded influence but held no real power. They lived in luxury while owning nothing. They bore children they couldn't fully acknowledge. They loved men who could discard them on a whim. They smiled through humiliation and aged in terror of replacement. Every moment of their lives was a performance, every relationship transactional, every gift a reminder of their fundamental powerlessness. This is what it truly meant to be a royal mistress, not glamorous romance and political intrigue, but calculated exploitation wrapped in silk and jewels. These women were used until they were used up, then disposed of with varying degrees of cruelty, depending on how inconvenient they had become. They were human sacrifices to male ego and dynastic concerns, their suffering considered acceptable collateral damage in the grand game of royal power. History remembers the kings. The women who warmed their beds and bore their children were meant to be forgotten, ghosts haunting the margins of official records, beautiful, broken, and ultimately disposable.